Howdy folks, Deacon Parsons here. The state of Colorado just made marijuana legal, and that's put legalized drug back in the headlines in the front of everybody's minds. The way I see it, we've got a few options to go forward that make some common sense. So sit down and kick back a little bit and we'll talk about it, see what we can come up with. Before we get started though, there's a few things we need to clear up. There's a lot of folks that keep saying that marijuana is just like alcohol. And that's just false. First of all, it's possible to use alcohol and not become intoxicated. The whole point of using marijuana is to become intoxicated. Whether it's beer, wine, or hard liquor, there are billions of people on this planet that use alcohol on a daily basis and they don't become intoxicated. Intoxication is an abuse of alcohol, not its main use, no matter what all the college Facebook pages say. On the other hand, the whole point of marijuana use is intoxication. It's a rare person who smokes marijuana who does not become intoxicated. And like most Americans, I don't really have a problem with medical marijuana if there's a legitimate medical use for it. But we all know that the medical marijuana movement is not about health. It's about a backdoor way to make marijuana legal. Okay, with that settled, do we really need to change the laws? And I think the answer is yes. I think if we look at the status quo, this thing that we call a war on drugs when it really isn't a war, I think it's a failure. I think for the most part it doesn't do anything to stem the flow of drugs. And all it does is keep the drug lords rich, police and prisons and courts in session and getting our tax money, and it just keeps the streets of some of our cities to be a free fire zone. Okay, so change is needed, and this question is, the only question that we really have is, which way are we going to jump? Now, before I get into my three different plans, I want to say something about our criminal justice system. We're going to have to change it some. We need to cut out all the namby-pamby, cases thrown out on technicalities type of thing. We need to stop dropping charges, cutting deals, and we need to present all of the evidence to the juries. Once we get that squared away, we're ready to go to one of these three plans. Option 1. Make the war on drugs a real war. Planes, bombs, guns, and lots of dead people. Now, there are countries in this world that make their war on drugs a real success. We would need to define in very clear lines what constitutes a drug dealer. Make sure that the whole chain, from production through distribution, sales, money laundering, the whole thing, everyone in it qualifies under our drug dealer definition. If you are making profits on selling drugs, we execute you. No lesser charges, no deals, no judicial discretion. No suspended sentences, no 15 to 20 years of room and board and medical and legal expenses. If a jury presented with all the evidence convicts you of drug dealing, you will be executed no longer than 60 days after that conviction. Do not pass go, do not collect $200. For the purposes of option 1, drug addiction is a disease and a defense one time. If you are doing drugs, we the people will clean you up once. We'll build treatments, facilities, and we'll send you there, dry you out one time. If you get caught doing drugs again after that, no deals, no suspended sentences, no lesser charges. No 15 to 20 years of room and board and medical and legal expenses. If a jury presented with all the evidence convicts you of using drugs a second time, we execute you no later than 60 days after that conviction. And yes, I would extend that punishment to the abuse of prescription drugs and the abuse of alcohol. Option number 2. Legalize all drugs. Now this isn't as crazy as it sounds. The notion that as long as a person is putting something in their body and they're not hurting anybody else really has an appeal to it. We like the liberty of it. The fact that our life experience tells us that a person who is using drugs is eventually going to hurt themselves or someone else isn't really a good enough excuse to not let them go ahead and have their shot. As long as they're willing to pay the price if and when they do hurt someone else. And there's the rub: responsibility. I have yet to meet anybody that advocates the use of recreational drugs that wants as much responsibility as they want freedom. I'm completely willing to give someone the extreme freedom to use any drug they want as long as they're willing to give me their vote to provide that if and when they do hurt someone else, that they suffer the extreme punishment that goes along with that extreme freedom. For the purposes of option 2, drug addiction is not a disease and it's not a defense. You are 100% responsible for putting those drugs into your body, and you are 100% responsible for everything you do while they're there. And yes, under this option I would also include prescription drugs and alcohol abuse. And again, we need to sit down and we need to codify exactly what constitutes hurting someone else. Obviously, committing a crime while you're under the influence of drug would be part of it. But we also need to include things like failure in your responsibility to others, spending all your money on drugs and the kids aren't fed, failure to properly feed, clothe, and supervise your children. Sit down, have a nice long conversation, and make some very clear, crisp lines. Then, if a drug user crosses those lines, after they are convicted by a jury who has been given all of the evidence, they will be executed no longer than 60 days after that conviction. No lesser charges, no deals, no judicial discretion. No suspended sentences, no 15 to 20 years on death row with free room and board and medical and legal assistance. If a jury presented with all the evidence convicts you, you will be executed no later than 60 days after that conviction. No mercy, no second chances. You chose to put drugs in your body, you hurt somebody else, we're done here. And make no mistake about it, if you really want legalized drugs, you can get most people to sign on for this option. You could have it legalized tomorrow. For the squeamish who don't like the extremes of option 1 and option 2, I've got a middle of the road option that might be more appealing. Option number 3, make drugs legal in prison. Make any drug available to anyone who wants in any amount they want for free inside of prisons. If you want to do drugs, check yourself into prison. The prisons could use confiscated drugs, or they could set up their own in-house production. That way drug users can practice their freedom in a controlled setting, away from innocent citizens, keeping the problem completely contained. This would eliminate demand for illegal drugs and greatly reduce crime in the community. If you want to check yourself out, get clean, leave all the drugs there, and go home. We know from medical studies that most drug addicts will eventually get to the point that they'll ignore food and water and just go get another fix. There will be no medical treatment for overdoses. By not artificially slowing down the process, this will allow addicts to eventually self-execute themselves, permanently removing drug cartels' demand and freeing up prison space. As the percentage of the population that's prone to drug abuse eventually naturally selects itself into extinction, the problem solves itself. Now, the more astute among you have probably noticed a theme running through these 3 options. That theme of death. That's not my fault. I'm not intentionally inserting the death option into the recreational drug use debate. Time and again through history, recreational drug abuse leads to crime, abuse, and death. That's why they were made illegal in the first place, because the people who love and care about the people who become addicted actually love and care about the people who become addicted. But if people refuse to heed the lessons of history and stay away from the poisons, so be it. Stupidity isn't unconstitutional. We're really tired of trying to get through your thick skulls. As long as you're willing to take full responsibility for your actions, we're willing to get out of your way. Well, there you have it. 3 very common sense ways to go forward with our legalized drug options. This is Deacon Parsons saying, love your maker, love your mate, and do what's right because it's right, and devil take the hindmost.